And joining us now on the debate, in Sudbury, Ontario, Diane Marleau, former federal cabinet minister from 1993 to 99. In the nation's capital, Art Eggleton, former federal cabinet minister from 1993 to 2002. And Judy Sgro, former federal cabinet minister from 2003 to 05. And here in studio, Monty Quinter and David Ramsay, both former Ontario cabinet ministers. Mr. Quinter from 85 to 90, and then again from 03 to 07. And David Ramsay from 87 to 90. And then again from 03 to 07. It's good of all of you to join us, both here and at our metaphorical table around the province of Ontario. You have all, at various times of your lives, been where everybody who gets into provincial or federal politics wants to be, and that's at the cabinet table, helping the premier or the prime minister of the day make decisions. And then one day, you found out you weren't. And I want to start with that day. I want to go around the horn and get the experience of finding out that you're not in cabinet anymore. David Ramsay, to you first. How'd you find out?
Well, the Premier called me about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and that was the start of his calls to inform everybody they were going to be in the cabinet, and I must say it was very, very shocking. I had just enjoyed 4 years in the McGuinty government, a wonderful time in 2 portfolios, M&R and Aboriginal Affairs.
Natural Resources.
And loved it, yeah, Natural Resources, and loved it. And it was a shock, but I certainly got it. And in part of the call, he said, well, you know, you'd been in there a couple of times. I've had 4 portfolios. And governments have to renew themselves, so, but it was hard to take, obviously.
Monty Quinter?
I had very much the same experience.
Did the Premier call you?
Oh, yes, the Premier called me at about the same time and had the same story. You did a great job in the ministry that you had, but it's I've got to get some new people in. I've got to make room for them, and this is what I'm doing.
Diane Marleau, how'd you get the word?
Well, I was preparing to go out of the country actually for a meeting the next day. We were organizing the Francophonie Summit for Moncton, and it was about to happen in about 2 to 3 weeks. And they called and said, come over to 24 Sussex. And I went over there, and he told me, oh, by the way, on this date, I want to drop you from cabinet.
This is Chrétien who said this.
This is Chrétien, and he had me in person. I must give him that. And I was shocked. I said, well, what about the summit? And I'm leaving for these meetings tomorrow. Oh, he says, go for the meetings tomorrow. When you come back, then it's going to happen. I just I was really in shock that it would happen this way. And I said, what about the summit? He said to me, you're not to go. And I knew then that there was something more to this story, and I can tell you at length what it was, but it concerned Mr. Chirac, the President of France, and there was no way that Jean Chrétien was going to have me where he was.
Judy Sgro, how about you?
Well, it was a bit different. I was accused by an individual who was a criminal here in Canada that I had promised him that he could stay in Canada because he brought pizza to my campaign office, and you know, your hands are tied when you come to defending yourself when you're a minister of the Crown. So from my perspective, I stepped down because I wanted to be free to fight back.
Art Eggleton, how did you find out that you were no longer going to be in cabinet?
Well, I was out having a lovely Sunday morning brunch with my daughter. I get a phone call from the clerk of the Privy Council who says, you're out. Call the Prime Minister, call Prime Minister Chrétien. I called him, and I didn't agree with his decision, but he had made his decision. I was shocked by it, and then I ended up 2 hours later watching on television as they swore in my successor.
So you've all kind of expressed a certain amount of shock at getting the news, and Art Eggleton, let me follow up with you. When you find out, are you allowed to argue? Are you allowed to say you're making a mistake? I don't agree with this. Let's revisit this?
Well, I said that. I said to him, I said, I haven't broken any rules, and I think this is a mistake. I'd like to have a further opportunity to talk with you about it. But he had already decided. In fact, he'd already offered the job to someone else even before I talked with him. So as much as I protest, it's really his decision. It's the Prime Minister's decision. I have to respect that. And I said, well, I'll respect that, and I'll accept it as much as I accept it with great shock and reluctance.
Monty Quinter, is it the kind of thing where you say, okay, I get it. You want to get a younger face on cabinet, but do it at someone else's expense, not mine. I'm doing a good job. Do you say that?
I said, I can paraphrase what you said, but that's basically what it was. And during the conversation, of course, he said, well, I have another responsibility that I'd like you to take on, and he offered it to me.
Okay, we'll talk about that later in the program. But David Ramsay, same deal. Do you argue with the Premier when he tells you you're out?
I didn't. I was absolutely stunned. And I'd had a reputation around Queen's Park of having done a really good job in M&R and good staff, and we'd done everything we needed to do. And I was just shocked by it.
Diane Marlowe, I'm going to read this to you. This is an excerpt from Stefans' book, and I want you to tell me how much of this experience rings true for you. A week before, this is Linda Diebel writing about Dion. A week before, I was one of the most powerful politicians in Canada, Stéphane Dion said of being dropped from the cabinet by Paul Martin. A week after, I was with 3 or 4 people in my writing office wondering how we would survive and what it was that we needed to do. Does that ring true?
Well, maybe for Stéphane Dion, but it certainly doesn't ring true for me, because remember, I was elected in '88, and I always felt that my first duty was to the people of Sudbury. And when you're a cabinet minister, you don't always have the time that you really need to devote to the kind of constituency that I have. So in that aspect, I don't agree with him, but then he came into cabinet and then was elected, so there was a different way for him. He doesn't represent the same kind of constituency. So perhaps for him it's his truth, but for me it was very much different than that. The people of Sudbury supported me right from the beginning. That wasn't a problem at all.
Judy Scrow, you still sit in caucus with Stéphane Dion. How much of his experience rings true from what you went through?
No, I am very much in the line with Deanne. My first commitment has always been to my constituents. I'm close with them. And frankly, I had tremendous support from them as I went through a very difficult time.
One of the things, David Ramsey, that I'm always struck by is how colleagues react when they discover that you've been dropped. And it usually goes one of 2 ways, and I want to see how it went for you. Did the phone ring after you were dropped?
Oh yes, the word got around that evening, and I got a lot of calls from a lot of friends who were quite shocked. And the news had to be held just within ourselves, though, till the next day, because it didn't really break until the next morning publicly. But sure, because they become your friends, and we get close.
What kind of things do they say?
Well, they're all stunned too. So really, it's just, if it's unexpected, you know, as people said, if you'd done everything right and hadn't done anything wrong, it wasn't expected. And so they're a bit stunned too. Art
Eggleton, I've heard other cabinet ministers in the past say that they saw people make an effort to kind of cross the street and be on the other side of the street once you're out of cabinet, as if you've got some kind of communicable disease they didn't want to touch. What was your experience?
Well, first of all, you know, being the head of the biggest federal department 1 minute and not the next, being at the cabinet table as the vice chair of economic policy and not the next, it's a big change. You know, it's a big loss in terms of a feeling of direction and purpose. But in terms of my colleagues, I got a tremendously warm response. My first caucus meeting after I left cabinet, I got a standing ovation from everybody in the play, including Mr. Chrétien. And at a party function a week later, again, another standing ovation. So I was getting a lot of support from people within the party and within the caucus.
Diane Marlowe, how about you?
You get lots of support within caucus, within the party. Obviously, all cabinet ministers have people who are their enemies, and they're quite happy to see you go, and they're hopeful to take your place. But overall, as soon as they found out they were coming to see me, they came right away to my apartment. There was an awful lot of very sad feelings about what had happened to me, and the feeling was that I hadn't been treated very well.
Monty Quinter, the cynic in me wants to ask whether or not those feelings are genuine, because of course your colleagues can't move up unless those who are there move over. So I imagine people approached you as well to offer their sympathies. Could you tell how much of it was legit?
I think it was legitimate. I had calls from my colleagues, I had calls from stakeholders, I had calls from the bureaucracy, all of them quite surprised at what had happened. And, you know, I've been around for a long time. In 1985, when I ran, the Conservatives had been in power for 42 years. I had no expectation that I was going to be in government. Most people had no expectation that I was going to win. I ran against 2 incumbents. I won and went into cabinet immediately, and then spent 13 years in opposition. So the idea of being in opposition wasn't something that was really sort of foreign to me. And not only that, I did some of my greatest accomplishments in the legislature while I was in opposition. I brought in a bill on alternative medicine that is known as the Quinter Bill across Canada. So there is very definitely, you know, a role to play whether you're in cabinet or not.
We'll get to that as we go along. David Ramsey, you did something the day after you got shuffled out of cabinet that frankly I will never forget. which is you showed up at the legislature and applauded the swearing in of the new cabinet, which didn't include you. And you must have been hurting when you did that, but you were there anyway. What were you doing there? Because some people didn't show up who got shuffled out, and that was understandable as well.
Well, it was tough, but I was supporting my team, because it's still my team, and I want my team to succeed, and I'm still part of it. I'm just playing in a different position on that team. And I had worked with many of these people very closely, obviously, in my role as minister, and it was their turn now. I mean, certainly didn't like it, and it was tough to take, and it hurt. But I wanted to support that team and also make sure they didn't feel guilty about anything. It's your turn, get in there and do a good job.
Judy Sgro, how do you keep that you're still my teammates and I want to support your view when deep down you got to be angry at the, the turn of events?
Well, clearly it's difficult. Whether whoever makes a decision and how it ever unfolds, you are, widely sought after one day and you have your car and all of those things, and the next day all of a sudden you are back to being responsible for your constituents. It hurts, it's difficult, and but it's a euphoria when you get a chance to be in cabinet, and other people want an opportunity as well, and you just have to console yourself as you did the best you can, and now it's someone else's turn.
Diane, how long does it take to get over the resentment of being dropped?
I would think that the hardest part of being dropped was really the lack of busyness. You're so busy as a cabinet minister, and in my final years as a cabinet minister, I had two portfolios. I had CETA, which was an international portfolio, and La Francophonie. Suddenly, that's gone, and when you're in Ottawa, you're just going to your committee, and so you're not as busy, it's not as stimulating. That's probably the hardest part. When you're in your riding, that doesn't change, but it's this lack of stimulation, because when you're in cabinet, there's always something happening, something new occurring, something new to learn, some new decision, some new document to read. So you're extremely busy, you don't have time to think about all of these things.
Art Eggleton, the resentment, when does it go away for the guy who dropped you?
Well, time heals that, and out of 11 years that I was a member of Parliament, I spent 9 of them on the front bench in the cabinet. And that's a great honor and a great opportunity to serve. So I look back at that now with some time and distance. I said that was a wonderful chance, and I am most appreciative to Mr. Chrétien who gave me that opportunity.
Well, you think that now, but you weren't thinking that then.
Oh no, but I still agree with David Ramsey. I still felt a part of the team. But yes, it took a while to get over it. I was also concerned about my staff, because all of us, when we ceased to be cabinet ministers, we have staff. I had about, I think, 7 or 8 of them, and they're all of a sudden looking for jobs. So you're concerned about them too.
Monty Quinter, I want to ask you about that, because that is true. You didn't just lose your job on that day. All the people who work for you, or many of them, I guess, did as well. What happens to them?
Well, they were all gone or went to other ministries, but that's a very, very difficult situation for them. They were involved in my campaign. They all took leaves of absence to do it. They just took it as a given that we would be back in some role in cabinet and that they would have jobs, and suddenly they didn't have them.
Do you break that news to them?
Yes, absolutely.
So they don't hear from anybody else? You have to call them up and tell them?
I had to not call them up. They were all in the office. I called them in and told them that I just had a call from the Premier and I'm not going into cabinet. They were absolutely stunned. The biggest concern that I had, and I don't have any real resentment, the biggest concern that I had was that people would say, well, there must be something more to it than that. There must be some reason why. And then you're sort of out there, and people are saying, there's got to be. It can't be just because they want to give someone else a chance. There's other people in there that have been there as long as you have, and they're not out, so there must be some reason. And that's difficult, because to my knowledge, there was no other reason other than that.
Judy Sgro, that was a real issue around your departure, wasn't it? Just this whisper campaign around you all the time. How'd you deal with that?
Well, that was, I needed that ability to be free to spend the next 6 months, which is what I did 24 hours a day, fighting back, because your personal reputation is more important than anything. And to me, I gave the job up in a second. I wanted to be free to show that I had nothing to do with this individual, never did talk to him, never met him. And I was able to accomplish that because I put all of the focus in, and I was able to show people that, this was a lie, and in fact sued the individual. So I got the satisfaction back, but it was at a huge cost.
You got the satisfaction back, but I can think of similar circumstances where, for example, the former Ontario Finance Minister Greg Sorbera dealt with some charges against him that were false, and he got his job back after he proved that they were false. You didn't get your job back. How bad do you feel about that?
I was supposed to get my job back, but some other circumstances happened in that 6-month period of time. And, you know, at the end of the day, we've got to do what's good for the party and what's good for the country. And at that time, having someone else get the upcoming cabinet opportunity was important for other reasons. I understood and I accepted it.
Now, I'm trying to remember here. Are we talking Belinda Stronach?
Yes.
Okay, so she crossed the floor and got the job that maybe you were supposed to get.
Yes. But that's, you know, life in politics is not easy, and you get hurt and you have to keep up and keep going. It's supposed to be a team sport, and if we believe in putting our country first and our party there and our constituents, then you do what you got to do. And yes, it hurt.
Let's go back, David, to first principles here. Why is being in cabinet such a big deal to begin with?
Well, it's huge because you have the ultimate control of a certain portfolio of government. And if you really get into it, it's a wonderful opportunity to have some influence. And in my case, I was in charge of all the lakes and the rivers and the trees and the forest industry, and a huge important part of this province, and had an opportunity to bring in pieces of legislation like for endangered species and biodiversity. So you really have an opportunity to sort of change the face in that particular area. Then you get the opportunity to sit around the cabinet table and to voice opinion on everything that goes on in government and really have a say. So it is, as everybody said, a huge honor and privilege.
Diane Marlowe, did you feel when you were in cabinet that you had the opportunity to shape events or policy in this country in a way that you never would have had you been on the back bench?
I think I did. I can tell you that when I was the Minister of Health, the idea that I could enforce the Canada Health Act, the fact that it was difficult didn't stop me. And I was able to do that, and I certainly feel that if I hadn't been able to do that, Medicare would have been, if not completely destroyed, at least well on its way to being destroyed by some of the premiers in the country who didn't believe in it.
Art Eggleton, you've had one of the most, I guess, interesting collection of jobs in public life. You, of course, were the Mayor of Toronto, you're a Member of Parliament, you're a Cabinet Minister, now you're a Senator. Being in Cabinet, how is it either better or worse than all those other jobs?
Oh, well, I enjoyed doing them all, but I got to tell you that being in the cabinet room, there on the second floor in the center block, you're at the center of the Canadian political universe, dealing with some of the the great policy issues of the day facing the country, both in a domestic and an international context. There's no place like it.
Monty Quinter, you were, I think, if I remember right, when you first came in 3 years ago, 24 years ago, Minister of Financial Institutions.
No, I was Consumer and Commercial Relations, then Financial Institutions, then Industry, Trade and Technology, and then Community Safety and Correctional Services.
You know, incidentally, when you were Industry, Trade and Technology, do you know what we used to say behind your back about that?
Yes, Monty is traveling.
Ministry of Industry, Travel and Technology. Yeah, Industry.
He was only here if there was a strike at Pearson. That's the only time he'd be here.
MITT. We used to say, Monty, I travel and travel. Yeah. Which you did.
Yeah, and I still do.
And you still do. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
But did you feel like a powerful guy when you were in cabinet in a way that you don't now that you're out?
No, I had sort of an experience when I was the chairman of the Toronto Harbour Commission. That was like being a minister. It was a government agency and I had responsibility for it. So this was just another similar situation. I just had to learn what the issues were. And I never ever felt that, I was a powerful person. I was just doing my job, did it the best way that I could. And but there's no question, though. Ian Scott, when he wrote his memoir, said to make a difference. And when you're in the cabinet room and a minister of the cabinet, you can make a difference. And I've left a legacy in virtually every ministry that I've been in, and that's very satisfying to me.
Judy Scrow, why is it better to be in than not to be in?
Because you're really part of the action, and it's a fabulous opportunity. You get a chance to sit across the cabinet table, discuss various issues that are extremely important for our country, and to have a voice. And I mean, it is fabulous to have that opportunity to do that. You do make a difference, whether it's in our own individual portfolios, but you have a chance over the cabinet table to discuss a multitude of issues that are pertaining to other portfolios, and to voice what you think is right or wrong, or your comments. It's a fabulous thrill to be able to be a cabinet minister.
Well, Diane Marlowe, let me follow up, because you've heard this before, and I don't want to sound like some hard-bitten cynic here, but you know that people say, look, there are 4 people, whether it's at Queen's Park or on Parliament Hill, who make all the important decisions, and the rest of you are what Donald Savoy, the political scientist, called a focus group, and the job is really not what it once was. How true is that?
That's not really true. You know, yes, you're not necessarily the one making all the decisions, but you have a voice. And sometimes that voice is much stronger than what people think it is. And I've been able to do things because I remember Prime Minister Chrétien believed in the same things that I believed in. And so when I voiced an opinion, if others around the table didn't agree with me, he would just suddenly say to them, no, she's right. And then the consequences of that would come out in the decisions.
Let's now spend some time figuring out how, once you've gotten over the shock of being dropped from cabinet and you have dealt with the sympathy of your colleagues and tried to move forward, how you recapture your mojo. David Ramsey, again to you first. Okay, what'd you do after you got dropped?
Well, like Monty said, usually what a premier or prime minister will do will give you some task. Because usually you're somebody of experience and you can still be of great value to the government. So in my case, it was a study on manufacturing. So
oh yeah, but hold on. Before that,
yeah.
you had to lick your wounds.
Oh, sure.
What did you do to lick your wounds?
Went and saw my grandchildren for about a week and spent time with them. Some people said, you got to go to a beach and just sit there. I said, that would drive me crazy. I needed to be engaged, and I went to visit my grandchildren and spent a good week with them, and that really helped. Great therapy.
Huh. Okay, Monty Quinter, when you got dropped, what did you do?
Well, in the same conversation that I had with the Premier, he said he wanted me to take on the chairmanship of the Ontario Trade and Investment Advisory Council and to succeed Ernie Eves. And that's an area where I had enjoyed some success when you talked about
Monty, I travel and travel.
That's right. And the role is to advise the ministry and the government on opportunities, international trade and investment opportunities.
But were you able to focus on that next job? I mean, presumably there's a transition period you have to go through before you can focus on the next task at hand. Where do you go, or what do you do to deal with that?
Well, I just had to find out what the terms of reference were and negotiate that, which I was able to do, and then that's what I do, and I'm enjoying every minute of it.
You didn't sit around and stew or anything
No,
like that?
no, that's not my nature to sit around and
Diane
stew.
Marlowe, did you go climb under a rock or something? What'd you do?
Well, I was really bored, and I was thinking to myself, especially when I was in Ottawa, and I was thinking, this is crazy. I've got to find something to refocus on. So I decided to learn another language. And so I took up Spanish, and I speak it quite well, read it, write it now, and it turned out to be an opportunity that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Okay, Judy Scrow, how about you?
I spent the following 6 months absolutely obsessed with clearing my name, and did absolutely nothing else except that, other than some constituency work, but there was nothing else that I had to do except clear my name and clear this issue up so that I could return to cabinet.
Was there a sense that once the 6 months was up and you had in fact cleared your name, that people accepted that? Because you know, sometimes the accusation sticks and you can never get past it, right?
Oh, yes, and I think they did, except that, you know, I still hear about it, and there are people who think because I stepped down from cabinet I had to have been guilty and didn't follow up on the story. The media was, quite frankly, quite helpful at the end. As much as they made the issue forward, they also were helpful in getting the message out. Started a front page story that I had been vindicated and so on. But it was a really rough time. I wouldn't want anyone to have to go through that experience.
Art Eggleton, what did you do to try to recapture your mojo?
Well, I went out to the West Coast and smelled the great air of British Columbia for a couple of weeks, but then I came back and I got into my constituency work quite heavily because I had long been a constituency kind of person back in my City Hall days, so it was easy to do that. And then I joined the Foreign Affairs Committee at the House of Commons, and I enjoyed getting involved in those issues.
But again, to that word, that phrase rather, that Ian Scott used, you know, you're all there to make a difference. Do you still feel like you are making a difference even though you're not in cabinet?
Well, I felt I was making a difference. I was contributing to some interesting reports at the Foreign Affairs Committee, and so I submerged myself into that.
Judy Scrow, how about you?
Oh, definitely. You know, once the fall had come, we had the summer session, September came, and I was back into doing committee work and carrying on doing what I wanted to do, which is represent my constituents, being a voice for them. I mean, we come here with an opportunity to be a voice for the thousands of people in our ridings. We can't let them down. We have an obligation to do that.
Okay, David, so you went out, you played with your grandchildren for a while, you got over the emotional upset of being dropped from cabinet. Tell me about the conversation you then have with yourself to say, okay, I still have a job to do, I still got elected, now what?
Well, you got to sink your teeth into something, and so I think you do, as just been mentioned, get back into your constituency work a little bit more. But then in this case, like most of us, we get a project assigned, and also an ongoing discussion of what would you like to do after that. There was something the government needed something immediate for manufacturing because of the crisis that we were entering into. But there was ongoing discussions about what my long-term interest would be, and I said that that was something environmental and making the government greener. And so there was an agreement that once you get this manufacturing report done, we're going to give you that project, and we'd like you to head that up. And that was great, and that's what I'm doing now.
Let me do one follow-up, though. That manufacturing report that you did do, you know, I'm presuming you put a lot of effort into that. I'm presuming that you worked hard on it. The government didn't exactly, you know, leap to embrace its recommendations, right? They kind of buried it. That tick you off?
I think time kind of eclipsed it, in that, in fact, the fall budget update, before my report was really going, I was handing over information of what I was picking up, and Dwight Duncan had listened to that, and by the time the budget had rolled around, quite a bit of it was done. And you know, before the thing was even printed and made public, because we really had to move on it. So as you can see by how the economy's gone this year, everything's eclipsed everything right now.
Diane Marlowe, do you think once you're out, I'm out for good and there's no coming back?
No, you never think that. You always look forward to the next job you're going to get. And I think what's important, though, is that people use your expertise and your knowledge. And that's not always the case. I'm glad to hear that my provincial counterparts, someone is thinking of what they know and putting it to good use. I didn't particularly feel that anyone put my knowledge and experience and expertise to very much use. I did go on the Foreign Affairs Committee. That was interesting, but I had been a Foreign Affairs minister, so it might have been interesting, but it wasn't as interesting as the job I'd had previously.
Now that's an interesting point. Monty Quinter, you go back to 1985 to Queen's Park, and of course a city-related job even before that. Do people come up to you and say, I know you've got some experience on this, so tell me, what would you do on this thing? Does that happen?
Absolutely. I say to my staff all the time, I've left the ministries, but the ministries haven't left me. I have people calling me all the time from every ministry that I've been in saying, I know you're not the minister there anymore, but we got to talk to you because when you were the minister, we had a good relationship, and we just want to come and tell you our problem. Maybe you can give us some advice. That happens all the time.
Art Eggleton, let me ask you about this. You know, when you're inside cabinet, of course, there are very strict limits on what you're allowed to say. While you're a team player in caucus, you are a serious team player in cabinet, and you can never run afoul of the leader of the day. When you're not in cabinet, do you have more free speech rights?
Oh, of course, but you know, you have less information at the same time. Listen, you can also make a solid contribution to policy development from outside the cabinet.
Can you really?
Oh, well, yeah. What I'm doing now in the Senate, I mean, I've been in public life for over 30 years, and I'm glad I can put that experience to good use in the Senate. I'm now the chair of the Social Affairs Science and Technology Committee, and we're doing some major studies on the cities in Canada, on poverty, on housing, on homelessness, and I'm a public policy person, so I feel that I'm still able to make a contribution in the Parliament of Canada without being in the cabinet room.
Judy Scrow, do you feel freer to say what's on your mind more now that you're out than before when you were in?
Oh, definitely. In my case, I needed that freedom. When you're in, especially as Minister of Immigration and Citizenship, there's always those issues of violation of privacy, this, that, and the rest of it. And so all you can do when you are being attacked of a variety of things is say, I'm sorry, I can't comment, I can't comment. That's immensely frustrating. And frankly, once I had the handcuffs off and I was no longer a Minister of the Crown, then I was free to be able to say and do whatever I felt was necessary.
Diane, how about in your situation?
I agree. I think when you're in cabinet, you really are part of that inner team. And even if you don't agree with their decision, you are part of the team and you don't, you just go with the decision. But when you're no longer there, you're really free to speak your mind. And I have many times, and you know, I would still be doing it were I there, but I'm now retired.
Retired and finished with politics, or retired and you're never finished with politics?
I don't know. I can't give you a straight answer because I don't know myself. I just found out people are coming to Sudbury this summer, so hey, you never know.
That is the case with politics, right? You can never say never, can you?
Well, I think it's almost, it's an addiction, I think. I think it's the people interaction, it's what you can do, how much can I do today? And it gives you a certain personal satisfaction, which you don't always get in other professions.
David Ramsey, can you speak your mind more now that you're out?
Well, in my case, I'm the Premier's parliamentary assistant, so I have to
maybe
be,
not so much.
So I have to be. I think I have to be a little careful. But Dalton McGuinty has given me a lot of latitude because I proceeded with a private member's bill, and he seems very supportive of that, and we're working on that. And you can certainly get up in caucus and say anything you want because cabinet minister can't. If something is going on in cabinet, that cabinet minister in caucus can't say something contrary to what looks like cabinet's going in a certain direction. But a caucus member, and we fight very hard for what we think is right. And as backbenchers, you can have a lot of influence.
Has your relationship with the Premier been inalterably changed because he dropped you from cabinet?
Well, it's a different working relationship because you're not in that inner circle, and so you're not seeing him as often because you're not in that inner circle. So it's different.
Monty Quinter, how about you? Your relationship with the Premier different?
Not really. You know, I have always had an opportunity to be in a ministry where I had very little really interaction with the Premier of the day.
Because you're traveling so much.
Well, not so much that I was traveling. You know, it's self-serving. When the last day that David Peterson was the Premier, he said to me, "You are the rock in my cabinet." And I said, "Yeah, I'm sure you told that to everybody." He said, "No, I never had to worry about you. That's why you're the rock." And he said, "I can't say that for some of your colleagues."
Diane Marleau, was your relationship with Jean Chrétien what it was?
No, it certainly wasn't. It changed very much. I think he felt somewhat guilty. He often had a hard time looking me in the eye. I know that much. So, no, we were never close friends, but it certainly changed after he dropped me from cabinet.
And how about you, Judy Scrub?
Not an awful lot. You know, things were difficult in my position, and I would have appreciated more support. But, you know, life is what it is, and politics is a cutthroat business that we're in, and you have to do what you think is right at the time.
Art Eggleton?
Well, we certainly weren't communicating as much as we had before when I was in the cabinet, but I've always had the highest respect and admiration for Jean Chrétien. I may have disagreed about leaving the cabinet, but that's his prerogative. But he was a great prime minister, and I respect that.
Did you have those moments though, where he couldn't look you in the eye after he dropped you if he saw you down the hallway or something?
No, I never felt that. We've had an amicable relationship. I just had a coffee with him a couple of weeks ago.
You had coffee with him?
Oh yes.
How'd that go?
It went well. He's looking good.
Okay, fair enough. Let's take, how are we doing on time here? We got about seven minutes to go here. I want to just sort of go around the horn and see, 6 minutes to go. You know, I guess the question we're calling this discussion today is there life after cabinet? And let me go around the horn here and get each of you to tell me what's the kind of one thing that has got your juices flowing again so that we can either answer the question, yes, there is life after cabinet, or maybe there isn't anything that has recaptured your imagination, and maybe there is no life after cabinet. So David Ramsey, get us started.
For me, it's actually two things. So I've got this assignment from the Premier to green the Ontario civil service. And it's fabulous. We've got 68,000 people, and there's a lot of work to do, and we'd like to work towards reducing our carbon emissions and all that. And then I've got a private member's bill where I want to more fully regulate the energy retailers who go door to door, who I've found in my area were really preying on very vulnerable people. And it got me very worked up, and I've come up with a bill, and I'm getting a lot of support. If
68,000 people turn their computers off after finishing their workday every day, what would that do to our carbon footprint?
Well, you'd save $5 million, the government would, a year. And I have to work out those carbon equivalents, but it's huge. And so that's the sort of thing we're going to start to do. And with that team, and I've already set up a blog internally, and we're having a dialogue and getting the ideas from our workforce, and it's very exciting.
Monty Quinter, what's got your imagination captured again?
Well, the work that I'm doing on the council. There are some fabulous people, leaders in industry in Ontario, excellent people. We're doing good things. I'm getting a chance to interact with many ministries as a result of it, and it's just great. I am enjoying every minute of it.
Judy Scrub, you're not in government anymore, obviously, but you're there on the opposition benches, still a member of Parliament. Mm-hmm. Have you been able to find one thing that has recaptured your imagination and given you the sense of purpose that you had when you were a minister?
Well, I continue to work on the city's file. I think that's extremely important for us as a party and us as a country. But I am the critic for seniors, veterans, and pensions. So frankly, those are all three areas that I have immense interest in. I'm very concerned with the seniors file, what we are doing for seniors, what we're not doing for them, the issue of veterans, and pensions, of course, given the current economy and all of the problems that are happening to many seniors' pensions with the stock market and so on. So those are three fabulous issues that I love working on, and I am spending an enormous amount of time working on those with, of course, Mr. Ignatieff's leadership, and totally involved and totally interested in loving every bit of it.
Loving every bit of it, but it can't,
Yes.
it can't possibly scratch the itches rather, that you had when you were in cabinet and really able to do something more about those things.
No comparison, no comparison. But we are in opposition, and I'm finding it very interesting, very challenging, and we're doing our best to do our jobs, make sure that our constituents are listened to, and my constituents. I also get a little bit more time with my family, and that offsets any of the negatives of not being in the cabinet.
Politicians always say that they like having more time to spend with their family. I always wanted to ask whether the families are happy to have them back. What's the truth on that?
Well, mine is, I can tell you, because you know, we spend so much time at events, and especially when you're a minister, you have very little time for yourself. And so one of the real best things here has been able to spend more time with my family, and you know, I love my constituents by and large, and so I'm able to see them more often. So I've turned things to nothing more than just pluses.
Art Eggleton, how about you? You got one issue that's recaptivated you?
Oh, well, as I said, being part of the Senate, being part of policy development, something I love to do, and being chair of Social Affairs, Science and Technology has certainly got me very busy. You know, you just have to do the best with the cards you're dealt with. And yes, it was a great opportunity to be in the cabinet, but it's also great to do what I'm doing now. And I'm still part of the caucus team, the Liberal caucus team, the family, and part of that team in planning for our getting back into government again. So it's a great thing to do.
Diane Marleau, I'm going to give you the last word because you're, unlike the other guests on the program, not in at all anymore. You're a private citizen again. So
That's right.
So how do you get your itches for politics scratched these days?
Well, you know what? I'm living in Sudbury, of course, and I'm hopeful that someone, somewhere, some group is interested in my experience and all of the different portfolios I've held and all of the jobs I've done between health, public works, CEDA, francophonie. You know, I mean, it's, I've just come back from a nice holiday, but I would love to get my hands into something at this point.
She's ready to work.
So I'm ready to work, yes.
Monty
Give me your
Quinter's saying,
phone number, Diane.
that's it. Monty Quinter's saying we got to roll your phone number across the bottom of the screen here. Okay. I don't know what it is, but it starts 705, I think.
It definitely starts 7:05. It's easy to find me.
Okay. Can I thank all of our guests? You know, it's really easy to come on television programs and talk about the latest success of your life if you've just been appointed to cabinet. A little tougher to talk about being dropped from cabinet and how you turn your life around after that. So I'm grateful to all of you for coming on the program tonight. In Sudbury, Diane Marleau, Art Eggleton and Judy Scrow in our nation's capital, David Ramsey, Monty Quinter here in our Toronto studio. Thanks so much, everybody. Really appreciate this.